Have you ever wondered why some people keep hurting you over and over again? Maybe it's not because they don't know what they're doing, but because you haven't shown them the consequences. Forgiveness is noble, but forgiveness without consequences is like handing someone a ticket to keep destroying you. Stoicism teaches us that you cannot control others, but you can control your own boundaries. And sometimes those boundaries are the very key to reclaiming your peace. 1. They were only sorry when they got caught. Have you ever felt this? Someone hurts you deeply, maybe through lies, betrayal, or taking advantage of your kindness. And then, when the truth comes out, they show up with a sweet apology, but their eyes tell another story. They're not afraid of losing you. They're only afraid of being caught. One of my patients, a man in his 50s, once told me, every time my son did something wrong, he'd just say, "I'm sorry, Dad, please don't be mad." But the next day, it happened all over again. I forgave him, but my heart grew heavier each time. Does that sound familiar to you? We're often taught that forgiveness is a virtue, and it is true, forgiveness has great power. But forgiveness is a gift you give to yourself, a release from resentment. What's different is allowing someone to keep crossing your boundaries without ever facing consequences. I want you to imagine this. A child touches a hot stove. They get burned, they remember, and they don't do it again. But if every time someone rushes in to pull their hand away, apply ointment, and let them try again, that child will never learn. Adults are no different. When people realize their mistakes come with no cost, they will repeat them, not because they're villains, in some cartoonish sense, but because it works. From a psychological perspective, humans learn through consequences. If a behavior brings reward without cost, the brain stores it as a successful strategy, and the next time they'll use it again. That isn't repentance. Psychology, the Stoics, saw this clearly. Marcus Aurelius once said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." Notice, he never said you must leave the door open to every insult. The wise response is to set boundaries and let consequences arise naturally. If someone lies, the price is lost trust. If someone disrespects you, the price is losing your presence. That's not revenge, that's reality. And reality teaches lessons. No false apology ever could. So next time someone apologizes just to escape discomfort, I want you to remember this. Forgiveness is yours to give, but consequences, they must carry themselves. That is how you protect both your dignity and your peace. 2. Repeated disrespect is deliberate. Think of someone in your life, maybe an old friend, a family member, or even your partner. They've hurt you more than once. And every time, after the damage is done, they come back with a neat excuse. "I was busy, I forgot. You're just too sensitive." At first, you wanted to believe it was an accident. But as the pain repeated itself, you began to realize this wasn't a mistake. It was a choice. I once knew a woman named Evelyn. After her husband passed, she felt lonely and clung to her daughter's renewed attention. Evelyn was grateful when her daughter called more often, helped with errands, and seemed more present. But slowly, that attention turned transactional, subtle hints about money, temporary loans. And whenever Evelyn hesitated, her daughter vanished, only to reappear with tender apologies. The cycle kept repeating. Hurt, excuse, charm, and then hurt again. This wasn't random, it was calculated. A strategy to keep benefiting without ever changing. Psychologists call this a pattern of manipulation. And strangely, The Stoics knew this centuries ago. They taught, we suffer more from our refusal to face the truth than from the events themselves. When we keep telling ourselves it was just an accident, we prolong our suffering. Imagine standing in a downpour. At first, you think it's just the weather. But then you look up and see someone holding a watering can above you, pouring it down with a smirk while pretending to feel sorry. Would you still call it rain? The truth is, when someone keeps hurting you, it's not clumsiness, it's communication. And your job is not to wait for another apology, but to draw a new boundary. Trust your instincts, that sinking feeling in your chest, the knot in your stomach after certain conversations. That's not paranoia. That's your body speaking. And remember this, when someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time. And here's something few people realize. Our brains are constantly rewired by repeated experiences. Science calls it neuroplasticity, which means if you allow someone to cross your boundaries again and again, your brain begins to accept that treatment as normal. A woman in her 40s once told me that, in the beginning, she reacted strongly when her husband belittled her in front of their friends. But after it happened many times, she chose silence just to keep the peace. And eventually, she said she didn't even feel angry anymore. What she felt was numbness. She told me, I think maybe I'm just too sensitive. I guess I've gotten used to it. Do you see the danger here? When we start accepting disrespect as a normal part of life, we slowly begin to lose ourselves. The Stoics never saw boundaries as selfish. On the contrary, they viewed them as an act of self-respect. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, value the integrity of your mind above all else. And boundaries are the way you do that. When you say, I will leave the conversation if I'm insulted, or if you continue to show up late without notice, I will stop including you in my plans. That isn't a threat. It's simply the truth. I know many people fear setting boundaries. What if they get angry? What if I lose the relationship? But ask yourself this, what kind of relationship is worth keeping if it only survives at the cost of your peace? Remember this, a strong boundary is not a wall of cruelty, it's a mirror. It shows the other person which behaviors are unacceptable. And if they truly value you, they will adjust. But if they respond with anger, guilt trips, or accusations, that's the clearest proof. They never respected you in the first place. So never believe that protecting your boundaries is an act of unkindness. In truth, it is an act of love for yourself, and even love for the other person, because it gives them the chance to learn respect. One of the most common illusions I see, especially among kind-hearted people, is the belief that if you just keep enduring, if you keep forgiving, then eventually the other person will change. We call it compassion, but in many cases, it's simply enabling. I once spoke with a man in his 70s who told me, I thought that staying silent and letting things go was the way to keep my family together. But the more silent I became, the more my son pushed, treating me as if I had no voice in my own home. He thought he was keeping the peace, but in reality, he had taught his son one dangerous lesson. Disrespect carries no consequence. You see, enabling is not compassion. When you shield someone from the consequences of their actions, you don't help them grow, you only convince them they can keep going without paying a price. That isn't love, that's avoidance. Imagine this, a close friend of yours is addicted to alcohol. Every day he drinks, but you clean up after him, hide it from his family, cover for him at work. You think you're helping, but in truth, you're only driving him deeper, because without consequences, there's no reason to stop. Stoicism teaches us this. Consequences are a mirror. not revenge. If someone lies to you, the natural consequence is the loss of your trust. If they waste your time, the natural consequence is that they are no longer prioritized in your life. This isn't punishment, it's truth. And I want you to remember, real love does not mean protecting someone from the truth. Real love is letting them face it and giving them the chance to grow from it. If you keep shielding them, you don't just betray yourself, you also betray their opportunity to change. So be brave enough to stop. Don't confuse kindness with tolerance. Setting consequences does not mean you lack compassion. It means you love in the right way for yourself and for them. Perhaps you've lived this, being in a relationship where you constantly shrink yourself down, always guarding your words, walking on eggshells to avoid an explosion. And slowly, you realize you've lost yourself. I once met a man named Carl, a gentle widower in his 70s. His son began visiting often under the guise of helping. But help turned into control over his money, his papers, even who could visit him at home. Carl stayed silent, believing silence would preserve the relationship. But what he didn't realize was that his silence had already cost him everything: his autonomy, his voice, and his peace inside his own home. You see, when we don't set boundaries, when we refuse to let others face the consequences of their actions, we hand our power over to them. We become shadows in our own lives. But I want you to imagine a different scene. Carl sitting across from his son, not with rage, not with bitterness, but with calm determination. He says, "You can help me, but you cannot control my life. This is still my home, and I deserve respect." Just one statement like that, no shouting, no blaming, but a clear affirmation. My life belongs to me. That is the strength of stoicism. Boundaries are not punishment, they are liberation. When you start enforcing consequences, something remarkable happens. You stop losing sleep over imaginary arguments. You stop fearing the next outburst. Instead, you breathe easier, stand taller, and live once again as a whole person with the peace that has always been your birthright. And yes, I know for many of you, guilt will rise up. Am I being too harsh? Should I give them one more chance? But remember this, that guilt doesn't come from your conscience. It comes from years of conditioning, being taught to value the comfort of others over your own sanity. Stoicism reminds us that justice is not revenge. Justice is the restoration of balance. You don't need to make the other person suffer. All you need to do is affirm, I will no longer participate. I choose peace. And do you know what matters most? Whether the other person changes or not, that is not your responsibility. The only responsibility you carry is to protect your soul, your dignity, and your peace. So if anyone has ever made you feel small, overshadowed, or erased, remember that you have the right to take yourself back. Peace is not a luxury, it is your right. And when you find the courage to enforce consequences, to say no, that is the moment you reclaim your wholeness. There is a common confusion I see in many people, especially those with kind hearts. They believe that forgiveness means reopening the door to let someone back into their lives. But the truth is, forgiveness and reconciliation are two entirely different things. I once heard a woman in her 60s say, I forgave my sister, because for years she said things that deeply hurt me. I no longer feel angry, but I also don't want to let her back into my home, only to be hurt all over again. Her words were simple, yet profoundly wise. Forgiveness is a gift you give to your heart. But distance is a gift you give to your peace. You can forgive to free yourself from the burden of resentment, but you are not obligated to continue enduring harm. Forgiveness helps you sleep at night and keeps your heart light, but setting distance protects your future. So old wounds don't get reopened again and again. Imagine this: a neighbor throws trash into your yard. One day, he comes over to apologize. You can smile and say, "I forgive you." But that doesn't mean you tear down the fence and invite him to keep doing it. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, and it certainly doesn't mean allowing. The Stoics emphasized this. You cannot control the actions of others, but you can always control your own door. Whether it stays open or closed is your choice. And that choice doesn't come from hatred. It comes from wisdom and self-respect. So if someone ever tells you, if you forgive, you must give them another chance, smile and remember, forgiveness lives inside you, but boundaries live outside you. Both are necessary if you want to live in peace and never again be a prisoner of the past. Anyone can say, "I'm sorry." Anyone can promise to change. But you and I both know words are easy. Actions are the real proof. And the truth of those actions only reveals itself with time. I once knew a man in his 50s named James. He forgave a close friend after being betrayed in business several times. The friend always came back with the same line: "I was wrong, this time will be different." And for a few weeks, it was. He acted kind, made promises, even showed a few gestures of change. But within a month, everything slipped back to the same pattern. James learned a bitter truth. Time does not only heal, time exposes. Have you ever experienced this? Someone promises you the world, and you want to believe them. But as weeks and months pass, you realize they haven't changed at all, or worse, they've only changed on the surface, just long enough to win back your forgiveness. That's when you understand what they wanted wasn't transformation. What they wanted was your easy forgiveness. The Stoics taught, time is the wisest teacher, because time doesn't argue, doesn't make promises, doesn't shed tears. Time simply asks you to observe. And in that observation, you discover who is truly striving to become better and who is only waiting for your guard to drop so they can continue the old ways. So if someone has hurt you, listen to their words, but don't rush to trust them. Let time speak. A truly remorseful person will show their change day by day, month by month. They won't demand that you forget instantly. They won't pressure you to erase the past. They will accept waiting as part of their responsibility. But if they slip back into old habits after only a short while, then you already have your answer. And even though that truth may sting, it is still a gift that protects you, remember. This promises may move you in the moment, but only time proves sincerity. And you deserve to wait for that truth, instead of rushing to hand over your trust too soon. After everything we've shared, I want you to hold on to this. You deserve peace more than they deserve another chance. If someone is truly remorseful, they won't run from consequences. They won't demand instant forgiveness. They won't try to make you feel guilty for protecting yourself. They will be patient. They will prove themselves through actions, and they will show you that their change is real. But if they repeat the same mistakes, if they exploit your kindness to keep hurting you, then that is the clearest sign. It's time to stop. Marcus Aurelius once said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. That power is the ability to say enough. Forgive in your heart to set yourself free. But let distance and consequences become the lessons. They must face. You don't need to shout. You don't need to seek revenge. All you need is to let them experience the simple truth. Every action has a consequence. And in that silence, in that distance, you create. You will find yourself again not trapped in someone else's chaos, but living in the steady stillness of your own strength. Life is far too short to keep repairing the pieces that others keep breaking. Let them carry their own weight, and spend the rest of your days on what truly matters: peace, freedom, and dignity. Because in the end, you are not born to be a shelter for someone else's chaos. You were born to live in the peace of your own soul.